I'm going to ask you kind of, I guess, two questions in one, just to confirm. The initial supply with Genius is half the amount of Hex, right? When it comes to the tokenomics with the token supply.
I think it was about half, maybe like 55, 60%.
Okay. Because in addition to that, I'm seeing and what I'm reading more about, and if you want to tell me just the number, and then we'll go into one of the fundamentals, because one thing I'm looking at now is because people really don't, people only care about uh, price appreciation. You know, a lot of people say they're in it for the tech. They just really, no matter if they're investing in a stock or cryptocurrency, they want to know that they're going to make money over time. And the interesting thing that I saw that you've talked about one of your videos was having numerous pumpamentals. So that's outside of like what people are normally or used to hearing. They're used to hearing tokenomics, real world utility. But tell me, pumpamentals. How many different pumpamentals have you implemented with Genius, and what would be the one you want to touch on first that means the most?
That's truly a difficult number to come up with because while while ultimately um, inside the white paper, it was decided for us all to put in and identify these pumpamentals, right? To identify them individually. Um, and in the Genius white paper, obviously, it seems like you've read it a lot, and I remember in your videos that you posted, you had mentioned reading it a lot. Um, Anybody who hasn't seen it should check this out because the pumpamentals section talks very much about the very rudimental thing that matters when it comes to supply and demand. And it turns out not to really, those aren't even exactly the fundamentals. So these pumpamentals, these are strategies. These are things that make things valuable. But the number of pumpamentals, even though like I think 30 were identified in the white paper, and Alex and others, and even some of the developers have discovered ones or discovered ways to categorize it that we really hadn't even thought of. Like, for example, oh, it's really awesome about, it's really awesome, but was not the main point. It just happened to have been, um, the main point was much more important, but the side note was amazing. Was, oh, hey, what's great about people depositing different blockchain asset collateral into the Genius contract to get Genius debt, which many refer to as the stability pool. Oh, it's really awesome about this, Robert. I remember one developer telling me about this. And this developer, he's totally assuming like this was the grand scheme of things. He's like, as people are settling that debt, their settlement's coming out of the market. It's being burned. Like, that's crazy. And I'm sitting there like, what are you talking about? Because when people talk about tech stuff, it takes a lot of listening sometimes to know what they're talking about. And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. Well, like we were aware it burned, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty awesome. Well, maybe it's bad. Let me take a whole weekend of looking at it on a spreadsheet and then discussing with Alex or other individual under other individual um, whether or not that's dangerous. And it turns out to be an amazing thing. We're like, cool. So I don't know how many pumpamentals. I do know that recently a video came out called Simply Genius. There's a shortened link for it. It's geni.to/simplygenius, geni.to/simplygenius. And it goes over some of those pumpamentals and fundamentals in very easy to understand language. The video series called Simply Genius is amazing. Very easy to understand.
I'll have to check that one out because, like you said, it sounds like you're discovering uh, new hidden fundamentals, based off what you're saying here, which is interesting too because I'm starting to realize that the fundamentals that are, were created to work are going to probably start surfacing once the community understands how to utilize them. For example, the stability pool, which I want to touch on the stability pool, but I also want people, because this is going to be recorded for people to listen. I think when they start from, let's say, the very beginning, and they're going, okay, what am I doing here? I'm creating a miner, and there's a basic miner. There's also an advanced miner, and people can buy it off the market, right off of PancakeSwap, Uniswap, and then go create their miner, or they can use a stability pool. So just kind of start with where people would start, and then kind of explain. I think it's one of those learning curves. Once you understand how to do that, then you'd be able to go to the advanced stage and start to try to get a better deal through the stability pool. So what's the main difference for users out there to understand when creating a miner, when you're first starting off, the difference between the basic and the advanced option, and then obviously, the explanation on. I mean, if you've been in Hex, longer pays better, obviously, but just kind of break that down if you can, and explain that.
Okay. All right. If I'm understanding right here, this is the focus is, well, what is the main difference between a basic and advanced miner? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
and that's a great question. Um, and really, even before that, even more fundamental, really is, well, who wants to use this? Now, chances are, if people who already use Genius are listening to this, they get at least the beginning and the fundamental. But somebody who doesn't use Genius or doesn't even use DeFi, what's the point of that, right? Fundamentally, Genius was designed to be a place where, you can store a value, and in order to store that value, you need the tokens to do that, or you hold the tokens and then you just use them for the utility that they are. But ultimately, the whole purpose of it is to do the best that you can possibly do with your passive capital, or the money that you're not using, or the tokens that you're not using to do anything. People out there, they may have all sorts of savings, or they may have all sorts of resources that they can't tap into, and they're like, man, I want to tap into these resources. Like, you sleep 8 hours a day probably, or less or more. Wouldn't that be great if we could all tap into that resource? So Genius itself is how to tap into that financial resource. That's one of the things that I find most exciting about it. And when it comes to that, people today, they understand like, cool, my mom wants to borrow $100 and then she'll pay me $120 back, right? People understand things like this. People also understand, buy something from one place, sell it for higher than another. That helps. And people also very much understand, hey, if I put my money in this special savings account, I'll get 1% a year. Yay! Like, some people are actually excited about that, and I'm not. And almost none of us DeFi people are excited about getting 1% a year, because we know better options exist. So therefore, these users, they're going to want to look into making a Genius miner. Now, people who want to make, let's say, passive income, let's just use a simple phrase that other people don't understand, passive income. People who want to make passive income, they have different options to put their money in. And here, and these options, when they hear things like staking, to most people, the word staking makes no sense. They don't get that it means, like, you're locking something up and you're getting a reward for that. And Bitcoin mining, for example, that made no sense long ago. It didn't make sense to people that by doing Bitcoin mining, it was profitable. So people who are looking for profitable opportunities, and especially techie, nerdy people like myself who wanted to make use of their experience, mining made no sense. But once you actually did it, once you actually did start staking, once you actually started mining, suddenly it made complete sense. So with things like Genius, mining is, I'm going to put it in different terms, in easy to understand terms. Mining is a way to earn passive income, right? And that's attractive. So mining is a way to earn passive income, but the way you're actually going to learn about it is by experiencing it in the first place. Like what you were saying earlier, people getting into a basic miner, and then maybe later they can get into an advanced miner. So the main difference, so here's your question. The main difference between a basic and an advanced miner is that is when you end early. If you when you set up a miner, for anyone that doesn't know, when you set up a Genius miner, what you're doing is you're committing an amount of Genius tokens, and you're committing an amount of time, or you're committing some collateral, right? But you're committing an amount of time. It's called a promise period. It's called your promise days, a length in days. So people can break their promises, and that's where the biggest difference is between a basic miner and an advanced miner. With a basic miner, if you have to break your commitment and end earlier than you said, uh, if you're able to do that, given like different blackout days, if you're able to do that, and in like 90% of the time you can, you are you are not going to lose your principal. You're not going to lose that amount of genius um, that you committed in the beginning. But with an advanced miner, you can lose that. You might, let's say you end a lot later, you don't end that early. Okay, you don't lose any principal, but with an advanced miner, you could lose as much as all of the principal. So once again, with a basic miner, if you get penalized, you end early, you get your principal. You may get some of your interest, you may get almost all of it, you may get none of your interest, whichever. But hey, at least you got your principal. And that is very important to many people in the crypto space, or many new people, right? Many new investors, many new users who want to figure out how to use something. It's very important that they get back what they initially put in. The advanced miner pays differently, as in it performs differently, a little bit differently. And it's a lot juicier. It's a lot more reward. But if it turns out that amount of time you promised for that advanced miner to run, if you have to end it early, you could lose some of your principal, or you could lose half your principal, or you could lose all.
Got you. So definitely, if you're looking at staking, let's say 1 million GENI for 1 year, and you might need that money for whatever reason, a basic miner might be your option, so you don't lose that principal versus the advanced. But if you can, delay gratification, which is I think is the best thing that I've ever done in crypto, and experienced that with Hex. Go with an advanced miner and stick it out, and the
Well,
payouts will be juicier, right?
yeah, and therefore it's like with the Genius system itself. I mean, um, well, to say in hex terms, people will keep um, a certain amount of hex liquid, and then they'll stake a certain amount of hex. But people in the Genius ecosystem, what they're finding out is, instead of having, an amount of liquid Genius and an amount in advanced miners, what they're finding is, well, you know what? Most of these basic miners, we can end anytime and get our principal back as if we were just having it liquid. So, so with Genius, uh, you have more utility. You can keep a little bit liquid. You can keep a bunch of basic miners that you might not be able to end all of them at the same time, uh, uh, but it's almost as the same as them being liquid. Just you're earning interest, or you're getting more and more as days go by, rewards allocated to your basic miner. Advanced miner, as we know, it's locked up, right? You're committed. Delayed gratification kicks in. It's all about delayed gratification. And with the basic miners, still delayed gratification. But hey, if you can get your principal back, for a miner that um, served 300 days and it was supposed to serve 600, and you got a big problem that you're in a pinch and you really want to get some of your genius and liquidate that, you're going to get your original principal back, and that's pretty awesome.
I definitely appreciate the flexibility of that. I think a lot of people in crypto Would appreciate that as well. It also gives them a reason not to remain liquid because there's really no point in just letting Jenny sit in your wallet and not earn. I couldn't make any sense of that unless you're really good at catching the swing trades. And, obviously right now things are volatility's there. I mean, you guys have only been around for 30 days. So, I've heard it best out there. The best time to invest in Bitcoin when there was no liquidity and Satoshi owned most of the supply. So, I mean, definitely right now is a good time to dollar cost average and use basic miners. But that's a good starting point. Getting into the basic
Yeah.
miners and then experiencing that plus the advanced miners. But jumping, into a
Well, if I
much
can
more.
say though, if
What
I
was
can
that?
say,
Oh, go
if I
ahead.
can just say, yeah, uh, Genius having the incredible flexibility that it has is insanely unheard of. And the things it does to achieve that is very novel because in a world of rules such as smart contracts and such as, like, I guess you can say like 401ks or whatever, in a world of rules, flexibility is very difficult to design. When you and a friend are talking about like a little deal you made where he'll let you borrow, you'll let him borrow $1,000 and you'll pay him back. You guys can always be flexible, right, and figure things out. But in a system where there's rules based, flexibility is hard, and Genius has incredible flexibility.
Absolutely. I
the
like
The
that you
core thing
implemented
of
that.
Genius was really to always give people, hey, if you got your stuff locked away and if you lock it away for 5,555 days and you're absolutely screwed if you change your mind in a couple of years, um, you know, the Genius's design was it needs to be super flexible, where it always has utility, and that's important. I'm glad you appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I think most people would, and definitely, it's scary to do a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year stake, knowing that if you, would end it early, which is something that kept me in hex stakes. I did, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year stakes, and I remember going, man, the price hex is taken off. I wish I could get out of this huge stake, but even though it would have been worth it at the time, I didn't want to take the hit, and I was just, I held through it. But I think my favorite thing right now with Genius, and now I'm starting to figure out. This is after 2 weeks of experimenting with it and trying to figure out on my own, is the stability pool. So break that down for people because I think this is another aspect that's going to really help um, the overall token price because it's going to, from my understanding, keep putting sell pressure or buy pressure on the open market and really give people good deals. Because if you're looking for a cheap deal for a Genius, if you have a good eye, the stability pool is the place to be. So kind of explain that, and then kind of get into how people will be able to kind of find